Hi, everyone. Angela Alston with Angela Alston Astrology. Welcome. So I am giving this video a little bit late because I was visiting my family this week in North Carolina. I made the poor judgment of traveling not only over Labor Day, but when Mercury was retrograde, which was a lot of fun. Not really, but I'm here and let's get into it. Before I start with where the planets are and what's going on, I want to invite you to send me a relationship question. I'm starting a new podcast later this fall. And so if your question is chosen, we'll have a live demonstration. Well, it'll be recorded, but for the podcast, I will give you a horary reading for free and just put the subject podcast. So I know that your question is intended for that and not just a regular horary question that you may have. Now, with horary, for folks who don't know, I don't need your birth date or the birth date or information of your partner. And so it's a very easy kind of way to send in a query. And if you could send that to Angela Alston Astrology at gmail.com, that would be awesome. And while I'm thinking of it, if you could like and subscribe to this podcast, to this my channel, that would be awesome because it really helps my channel grow. So this is where we're at this week, September 3rd through 9th, 2023. The sun is in Virgo from 10 degrees 32 minutes to 17 degrees 19 minutes, which means it has passed, by the end of the week, it will have passed its halfway point in its Virgo journey. Feels like it's going fast already. Now the moon is in 25 Aries at the beginning of the week, which would have been yesterday. I do this from Sunday, 12:01 a.m. to Saturday, 11:59 p.m. PST time. And so it ends in 2513 Cancer. And the moon phases, which I'll talk about in a couple slides, are the disseminating moon and the last quarter moon. Now Mercury is in Virgo, retrograde, and combust, which means it's close enough to the sun that it's really getting burnt up. And it is traveling 1639 Virgo back to 1013 Virgo. Venus in Leo stations direct at 1212 Leo, and she moves to 1256. And I have a classic Venus stationing direct story that impacts me. So yesterday, when Venus stationed direct, I got an email that my student loans have been forgiven. Now, I'm not as young as I look. And so I got my first student loans in the early 90s. Folks, I have been paying these literally for decades. That news, Venus ruling money, finances, that news blew me away. I did not know what to expect. And it was very welcome. I hope all of you have some Venus turning direct blessings come to your life as well. Mars is in Libra, traveling from 419 to 851. Mars has the distinction, we'll talk about this a little bit more, of not being retrograde, not stationing direct, just kind of moseying right along, which is a good thing, except it's not aspecting much. And that's okay, but Jupiter in Taurus is also retrograde, and so it is it's going to be stationing retrograde this week. It will be retraveling 1534, the degree that it stations, might be 15, anyway, it'll be going to 1531, so it is moving very slowly. Saturn is still retrograde in Pisces, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Retraveling 318 Pisces to 247 Pisces. So the moon phases this week. It's the disseminating to the last quarter moon. And the moon phase impacts the overall vibe. What we're all on a very ethereal level feeling an impulse to do. It impacts the energetic template. It has impacts on folks who practice moon magic and who are invested in the kind of lunar magical thinking. And as we all are experiencing cyclical manifestation, the moon phase can really impact that. And one of the things that I've noticed about moon phase, and it was something that I keyed into, not when I was an early astrologer. I probably learned the importance of moon phase when I was practicing for quite a few years. But somebody's natal moon phase imparts a subtle yet absolutely profound impact on their temperament and how they approach life. I'm a balsamic moon, but we'll talk about that next week when it is more appropriate with the moon phase. Now, I'm not going to get deep into it because there are astrologers who are much better and more versed than I am. Although I am somebody who practices moon magic, and I have for decades. But the disseminating moon happens about 3 to 4 days after the full moon. And I want to share with you a quote from Dana Gerhardt. And this is available on astro.com. She has a wonderful series of essays on the phases of the moon. And she, a very gifted astrologer. So disseminators, people born with their natal moon in the disseminating phase, disseminators are the culture's natural-born storytellers and teachers. The thoughtful retelling of their experiences helps the collective to reorganize itself, to re-inspire its mission. To some degree, this is desired from all of us at this moon phase. And this is so true. I have worked with folks who have disseminating moons, and so often they are teachers. If not professionally, then informally. They love to communicate, share their wisdom. And so if you think about what happens during a full moon, there is a light of consciousness. And now 3 or 4 days after that, what do we do with that? There's a pressure to manifest it outside of ourselves, to disseminate it into the world. And then from the disseminating moon, we move to the last quarter moon, which I think is on September 6th. So I think that brings us to Wednesday. At any rate, this is Dana again. And please go and read the full essay and all of them on astro.com. I've put the link here. So the last quarter moon is a full week after the full moon. During this time, the moon is in square to the sun. And that calls for a dynamic readjustment. The sun and the moon represent two of our vital forces in a sort of creative conflict. Sometimes the word crisis. There is an urge, a something that is almost uncomfortable. Dana says, last quarter moons are society's pivot team. I love that. Helping us see the dead cultural structures that need to be torn down, while pointing to the brave new worlds that lie just around the corner. They're born revolutionaries at odds with any empty authority. Last quarters enter their progressed new moon before the age of 15. And so younger than those born in all phases but balsamic, they see the world with perhaps fresher eyes, are inspired to abandon social norms, and know their minds before many of their peers know theirs. They're ahead of the curve. So on point. It's really stunning how somebody's moon phase, that was a key. You know, as an astrologer, you hit these moments that just sort of level you up in your interpretive abilities. And for me, understanding how pervasive, unavoidable and deep the influence of somebody's natal moon phase was. It really opened my eyes, opened my practice. And so moving on to what we want to talk about this week. And this week I'm going to really spend some time reviewing retrogrades. There's a lot of retrogrades happening in the cosmos right now. And I want to talk about how to work with them productively. I feel like there's a slight bias against them. You know, you hear a lot of complaining, a lot of fear around Mercury retrograde. The other retrogrades are not as well, I think, they haven't pervaded society to the same degree. Although in my client work, people are really, really struggling with the Saturn retrograde. So I want to give some tips on how to work with the retrograde, and I've put together a little tool for you. And then just check in on Mercury and Venus's progress. So here we go. I want to kind of show that retrogrades are a part of life, right? They're not these special, frightening events. They're part of our cyclical manifestation. And since they're a part of it and they are predictable, working with them rather than feeling victimized by them is really how to work with the energy. And so the sun and moon don't go retrograde, but I kept them here so that you could see that they're adding to the modality balance. There's a nice balance of modalities right now, that being mutable, cardinal, fixed. But there is not a nice balance of retrogradation. So the sun is mutable right now. The moon this week is it's going through them all, moves very quickly. Mercury is mutable. Venus is fixed. Mars is cardinal. Jupiter is fixed. Saturn is mutable. Uranus is fixed. Neptune is mutable. Pluto is cardinal. So we see everything represented here, which is nice. There's not a mashup of one modality, which can feel very unbalanced. However, Mercury is retrograde. Venus is just coming out of her retrograde. And she's going to be moving through her shadow phase until early October, but that doesn't really count. We're going to focus on the retrograde. Jupiter is turning retrograde this week. Saturn is well into its retrograde and has a bit more to go. Uranus is in retrograde, Neptune is in retrograde, and Pluto. Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. That's a lot. Now, the outer planets, I don't tend to really work with the outer planets very much. I'm primarily a traditional astrologer. However, the outer planets really do impact us, and I'm going to talk about when they impact us. They tend to impact all the time mundane astrology, what's happening out in the world, but they can impact one very personally as well. Now with Mercury, it feels like it's going retrograde all the time because it is. It's going retrograde at least once a quarter, almost once a quarter. No, yes, once a quarter. And it stays retrograde for a short amount of time. So it's every 3 to 4 months for about 3 weeks. Venus every 1.5 years. So not quite as common, and for about 6 weeks. Mars, the least frequent, every 2 years, for about 11 weeks. And the last Mars retrograde was in Virgo, and it was Gemini. It was a tough one. Jupiter every year for 17 weeks. Right? That's 4 months, 4 and change. Saturn every year, 20 weeks, 5 months. Uranus every year, 5.5 months. Neptune every year, almost 6 months. And then Pluto every year, 26.5 weeks, 6 months plus. A little bit. So yeah, it's regular. We can predict to the day, to the minute when they're going to hit. And they're not something to be frightened of. I have a lot of cardinal in my chart. I like to take control of the situation, work the retrograde, because the truth is there is magic, a type of magic in recurrence. And so when do retrogrades really manifest in your life, right? You'll have some people saying, I don't feel it at all. It doesn't impact me. I had no idea this was happening, whereas others are really feeling it. So why? Why do some people feel it more than others? Well, here's why. When the planet that is retrograding is the ruler of one of your natal big 3, and really if it's the ruler of any of your natal planets, but particularly if it's the ruler of your sun, your moon, or your ascendant, you'll feel it. When the retrograding planet is on one of your natal angles, when the retrograding planet is in aspect to your natal chart, either angles or planets in your natal chart. When the retrograding planet is in aspect to your progressed chart, and when the retrograding planet is important to your solar return chart, that's when it will really start to manifest in your life. And so what do retrogrades do? We all talk about what Mercury retrograde does. Transportation, machines, cars, communication. In general, retrograding planets, they slow down the forward propulsion and progress of whatever it is that they have sort of dominion over. They tend to bring up issues, people, and situations from your past, and often in a very cyclical way. If you look and see what was going on in your life at the last time this planet retrograded in this sign, it's neat to map your life story like that. Retrograde planets bring the unexpected into your life. They can stress your thinking, planning, organization, life systems, and goals. Stress is not a bad thing. Stress causes you to pay attention. It causes you to review and often strengthen and improve. Retrogrades can frustrate. There's no doubt about that. But they can also illuminate, because you have the chance to see these things, people, situations, in a new light. And they can also give second chances. I'm a big, big believer in second chances. And so retrogrades, I've created this tool for you. And if you want a copy of it, email me, AngelaAlstonAstrology@gmail.com, and I will be very happy to send it to you free of cost, because I think it's really important to wrap your head around the retrograde so you can maximize it. You can make the absolute most of it. And so I've filled in over here the planet and their basic degree. This is kind of rough. I don't have any minutes. It's just the basic degree of the planet. And you ask yourself, does this planet rule one of my natal three? Is it the ruler of my sun, the moon, my ascendant? Where is it hitting my chart? By angle or aspect? What planets is it interacting with in my natal chart? And then you look at that for your progressed chart and your solar return chart. And you'll start to get a heat map of what this is doing to your life at this time. And then you can do some journaling, some planning, some thinking around, based on what you find out, what can be reviewed, reconsidered, revisited in a way that empowers me. That, oh, wow, this is actually a great opportunity for me to deal with some of these things. And then you can do this, and you can do it for the upcoming month. You can do it for the upcoming year. You can plan how you're going to make the most and really maximize the retrograde energy. Because again, this offers you second chances. It offers you a chance to learn something new about something that's already occurred in your life. So much value is given on forward motion. And there's so much to be gleaned from taking the time to retrospect, introspect. Whether it's your finances, your relationships, the way that you communicate, reevaluating your goals. When you're always moving forward, are you still going in the direction that really fits with who you are and where your life is right now? Because we are dynamic creatures. that are continuously manifesting with these recurring cycles. So again, I would love to send this to you. Please feel free to email me and just say, I'd like the retrograde tool. And so I think I had mentioned this earlier. The retrograde that my clients are struggling with the most by far is Saturn retrograde. And so I just wanted to take a slightly deeper dive, give some key dates, and let you know that you're not alone. Saturn is considered the greater malefic in traditional astrology, and when it hits, you feel it. And hits by Saturn don't necessarily feel good. However, they help you level up. They help you come into your own authority. So Saturn, again, it's stationed retrograde on June 17th at 7:13 Pisces. It stations direct on November 4th at 0 degrees Pisces. But it doesn't leave its shadow phase until February 8th, 2024. Leaving its shadow phase means it will hit the degree where it went retrograde back in June. And then it'll be able to just move on. So for folks with angles or planets in 0 to 7 degrees Pisces, but really when you consider the orb, and for this I'm going to use just a generic orb of 3 degrees, we're looking at folks who have 27 Aquarius to 10 Pisces, or Gemini, or Virgo, or Sagittarius. That is the mutable kin. You get 3 hits from this Saturn before it's over. These will either be conjunct, square, or opposition. Again, this is an opportunity to really look at your foundation, look at issues of your own authority, parental issues, and depending on where it falls in your chart, will also kind of help zero in on what issues are going to be tested and are going to ask for you to evolve to the next phase of your development. Now, Jupiter, a retrograde, which we're just entering this week, Jupiter is considered in traditional astrology the greater benefic. However, you don't want to assume that Jupiter always bestows, Santa Claus-esque bestows its gifts, because one of the things that Jupiter can do is simply inflate. And depending on what it's hitting, that sort of inflation can be it can be awful. So Jupiter turns retrograde in Taurus on September 6th. It stations retrograde starting the 4th and carrying on to the 5th, and then begins its apparent retrograde motion on the 6th. It retravels the Taurus spectrum from 1534 to 534, so about a 10-degree span. It stations direct on New Year's Eve. Yikes. And then it's out of its shadow phase on March 23rd, 2024. So for folks with planets or angles, and I've included the 3-degree orb in this one, in 2 to 18 of Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Aquarius, you're going to get hit 3 times by this Jupiter retrograde. I'll be really interested to see how it manifests. I have Jupiter on my ascendant. And so this is one that will personally impact me. And now this is kind of a review because it was a similar situation last week. We were building to it, but Mercury trines Jupiter this week. It perfects when Jupiter stations to go retrograde. So when this aspect perfects, Jupiter's not really moving at all. Trines, though they are of the nature of Venus and considered either positive or neutral, a lot of trines can go unachieved because trines really need to be worked. But they're considered positive things. However, with Mercury retrograde, and then this week combust. In fact, Mercury enters Cazimi this week, where it is in the exact degree, in perfect union with the sun. And this is a really important time for a planet. It's when it's able to shed all of the baggage that it has accumulated over its synodic cycle and be born again. However, it's not a time of great strength. There is an understanding that when something is Cazimi, it is protected because it is in the throne room. But things don't really start to get better until that planet is able to turn direct, station direct, and then move far enough away from the sun that it can manifest and be its best self. Jupiter again tends to inflate, exaggerate, amplify. And so when you have a degraded and weakened Mercury and a very slow Jupiter, the positive benefits of this are going to be, they're just going to be a little bit clipped. You want to be careful with your words, your written communications, your emails, and there may be a tendency to overbook your life, overwork, or certainly overanalyze a past situation. Now, Venus is stationing direct as of yesterday. Woo! And now that she's direct, she's really going to be able to impress her will onto Jupiter more effectively. And this is a turning point where Venusian things, relationships, aesthetics, art, and finances will really hopefully start to improve for you. And again, Venus is out of her shadow on October 7th. That's an important date to keep in mind. So to recap, Mercury is trining a Jupiter. Whoa, anyway, Mercury's trining Jupiter. Venus is squaring a Jupiter. There's a lot of Jupiter energy, but Jupiter is stationing retrograde this week to begin its journey of reviewing and having things from the past, people, situations, sometimes even places come up for you in your life. Again, I want to remind you to contact me with your relationship horary question. Put podcast in the subject. And if your question is one that would work well, I would love to offer you a free horary. It'll be a lot of fun. And then if you're interested in a hard copy of that retrograde tool, please, drop me an email too. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful week.